Welcome back to another Introduction to Insect Taxonomy and Identification, a proper one this time. Today I wanted to talk about the mantises or the mantids. So this, I believe, is part 19. As kind of a review, we're down here in this cladogram. So we've gone through all the Entonatha, kind of the pseudo insects that are related to insects, the very old apterygotes, so the ones without wings, and then we went for the Paleoptera, which are the mayflies and the dragonflies. We did the stoneflies, the roaches, the termites, and finally we are all the way down here at the Mantodea, which is just great. So the mantids, everyone kind of likes. They're pretty iconic, culturally relevant. Just generally cool, especially the tropical ones. The ones in the U.S. are not great. They're kind of boring. But if you've ever looked at some of the orchid mantids or the violin mantis or something like that, they're really, really neat. So let us start with the mantids. If we look at kind of a reduced, simplified cladogram that I whipped up, this is not obviously all of the families. There are 35 families within the mantids, and 246 of them are in the US, five of them kind of naturally occurring, and then another one which is invasive. So we're just going to talk about those six families because trying to talk about 33 families would just take all day to get through all of them. I doubt I could find photos of all of them. A lot of the mantids are only tropical. They are overwhelmingly a tropical group, so it's hard to find some of these species photographed. Um, but in general, the mantids are very closely related to the termites and the roaches. They belong to the same evolutionary group, but they are not related to something called the mantis flies. So this is a mantis fly. It looks a really hell of a lot like a mantis. But it isn't. So, some of the things that you can tell, the wings look different. These are lacy wings, and the reason they look like that is because this belongs to a group called the Neuroptera, the lace wings, which are a holometabolous group that we will talk about much later from now. But if you've ever seen like a green lace wing or an antlion adult or an owlfly adult, these are very, very closely related. Their raptorial forelegs are very, very different. So they kind of recurve onto themselves, which is not something that generally the mantis, true mantids, that's not how their forelegs work. So don't confuse mantids with a mantis fly. They are very, very different. So we won't be talking about these until much later in this evolutionary chart. So going back to the families that are here, there are 33 families worldwide, and there are roughly 2,400 species worldwide. So 2,400 worldwide. In the US, obviously, we are not like that because this is, like I said, mostly a tropical group. So there are only 28 species in the US. So not very many here, and I say in the US, this is really like US and Canada. So in North America, north of Mexico, there's only 28 species. Not a ton. You could actually easily learn all of them. I'm not going to talk about all of them today. Most of them are in this family here, the Mantidae. This is the largest family of all of the mantises, and therefore also the largest in the United States. Interesting side note, the mantids, once upon a time, were the only, this was considered the only family within the Mantodea. But since then, we've kind of figured out that actually not all of these mantises are related. There's actually a lot of families going on. And there's just, more to talk about than just this one family. So there's 28 species in the US and Canada, scattered across 16 genera. Most of them are in the Mantidae. The mantises are, again, hemimetabolous. So if we go back to that cladogram, things that they have in common. So these are the hemimetabolous insects. They're hemimetabolous, so they don't go through a true metamorphosis. The immatures look a lot like the adults. And they're neoptera, so they can fold their wings over their back, which is how the mantis always holds its wings. And more interestingly, the mantis forewing here is thickened like a cockroach's wing into they are called the tegmina or the tegmen for one, and they are like a thickened wing. It's very, very leathery, and they use that for protection. So that forewing is not really used in flight. It's the hind wings that are used in flight, and the hind wings are thin and membranous and much, much larger. So they unfurl them kind of like a beetle or like the cockroaches do when they need to fly. Other things that the mantises all have in common, they generally lay their eggs in something called the ootheca, which is what is happening here. This is the ootheca Ca. And then ootheca is a proteinaceous kind of egg case that hardens like cement once it's been exposed to air, and it protects the eggs over the course of the winter. The eggs will hatch in the spring, and you'll get a new generation of mantids coming out. Other things, they are extremely variable in size, between 1 and 17 centimeters. They are all predatory. They have those raptorial forelegs that they use to grasp, hence the name praying mantis. They are generally heavily camouflaged. They have large triangular heads. So if we go back to this guy or this girl, because she's laying eggs, they have these large triangular heads with their raptorial forelegs. They generally have enormous eyes and very thin filiform antennae. One of the interesting things that they have is something called the pseudopupil. I think it's called a pseudopupil. And it's this spot here, which makes it look like they have a black spot on their eye, and they don't. So this is a trick of the light, because this is the parts, the ommatidia of the compound eye that are directly facing you. They don't reflect light back. It looks like they're absorbing all the light, so you just get this moving black spot, which is kind of interesting that they all seem to have. They are mandibulate with chewing mandibles. The head is hypognathous, so it always faces down. They can actually turn their head about 180 degrees, which is crazy. When it comes to their wings, they may or may not have wings. When they do have wings, they have these tegmina, but there are mantids without wings, and then there are kind of mantids with half wings. This particular female is very, very swollen with eggs, but generally the wings cover the entire abdomen, and then there are ones that it only covers half the abdomen. There's the ones that have little micro wings, and then there's ones with no wings. So it's very variable, and sometimes that can be used as a diagnostic feature for which family you're dealing with. They also tend to have these little short cerci on the end. So there are better pictures that I have, but we'll see the cerci in others of the mantis photos. So the first family I wanted to talk about, the Mantoididae. There is only one species in North America or north of Mexico that are in the Mantoididae, and that's Mantoida Maya, and they have a very strange look to them. They're very small. They kind of look a little wasp-like or a little cricket-like. They look very different from the other mantids. They are overwhelmingly neotropical, so they're mostly in Central and South America. And there's just the one species, and it only occurs in Florida. So you can see it needs that warm weather. Again, they're kind of cricket-shaped, and what helps with that, or the wasp shape, is that their wings are not thickened into tegmina. They're forewings. So no real tegmen here. It's a little, that forewing is a little lacier, a little more membranous, which is unique amongst the mantids. So if you are in Florida and you do collect a tiny mantis that looks a little bit like a cricket or a wasp, and it has more lacy wings, then you probably have a mantoidid, specifically Mantoida maya, which is the little Yucatan mantis. And that is the only representative within North America, north of Mexico, within that group. The next group are the Thespids. And the Thespids, again, are not very speciose. There's only 3 species in our area. They, again, tend to be neotropical. They tend to be pretty thin, slender insects, even though they are considerably larger than the Mantoididae. So this, you can tell, doesn't have any wings. This is an apterous mantid, and it has a little more flattened features. I couldn't find a ton of information about the Thespidae other than this is a relatively new family. Apparently, this used to belong to a different family, so I'm not entirely sure what its familial characteristics are, separate from the old families that it used to belong to. A more famous family are the Coptopterygids, which there's only one species within North America called the Brunner's mantis, and you will find these things everywhere. They look like walking sticks. They are extremely thin uh, and very well camouflaged. I've always found these in the summer months. If you just go through like really long grass in the summer months, pretty much anywhere, with a sweep net and just sweep the hell out of all of the long grass, you will find one of these Coptopterygids, this Brunaria borealis, and you won't know that you got it. You won't see them. They're extremely well camouflaged. They're usually green. Sometimes they're brown, like dead grass, and they will just end up in your net. That being said, they are extremely fragile and extremely hard to pin. They don't, once they're dead, they don't really support their body weight very well, and they tend to bend when you try to do a mount with it. So you do have to be very careful with it. But that's the only species of Coptopterygids within North America, North Mexico, but they're very, very easy to find. So we have talked about this one and this one and this one. The Liturgusids are really cool. These are the lichen mantids, and they're fairly easy to identify. They tend to be found on trees. They tend to hang out on trees on bark, and part of that is because they are so well camouflaged to hang out on trees. They are generally this sort of brown color. Sometimes they're speckled, and they have these enormous eyes. They have out of all the mantids in North America that we're talking about, the proportion of their eyes to their head is absolutely enormous, makes them very, very easy to identify. There are those short cerci I was talking about earlier, that are typical of all mantids, but these are very easy to identify. They tend to be smaller. They tend to have super big bulging eyes, and those are the Liturgusids, the lichen moths, and you can see where they got their name. They're kind of licheny camouflaged coloration. The last group of actual mantids that belong in the United States and Canada are here, the mantids, and this is the largest group. This is a stagmomantis that I used here. This is a nymph. You could hardly tell, other than the lack of wings, that this would be an immature. There's that weird pseudo-pupil again. This is the largest family of mantids in the world. There are 20 species in our area. They are kind of everywhere. Like if you collect a mantis, it's probably going to be a Mantidae. One of the things I found about a familial characteristic that's easy to pick up on is that when they do have their wings, their forewings are not supposed to be bicolored. I don't know if that's true. If anyone out there is a mantis enthusiast, can you let me know what a good familial characteristic for all of the mantids, specifically the family Mantidae is? Because that doesn't seem right to me. Maybe it is right, but I just don't know enough about that particular family. And then finally, there's the Tarachodids, and this is the only species in our area. This is Iris oratoria, and it is invasive. So this is a species from Africa that has made it into the United States and Canada, and it is now considered, I guess they don't call it invasive, they call it adventive. I don't think it's an actual pest. There's that weird pseudopupil again. One of the cool things about these is that they have these much shorter wings, so you can use that as an identifying characteristic. They also tend to have these little growths. The females have these little tubercles on the butt end on the seventh sternite, and that's about it. They tend to have these very especially compared to like the Brunner's mantis, they have these much shorter, not shorter, stouter. They're a much stouter, more robust sort of mantis, and And so it's a little easier to identify. There's also a series of characters on the pronotum where they have a series of indentations and narrowings, but unless you have the specimen in front of you, it's not super useful. And that's it. Those are all the mantids in North America. Examples of the 28 species. So you have 20 here, one here, one here, one here, three here. So 3, 4, 5, 6. So there must be 2 by deduction here. So that's it. That's all of the species. Almost all the species that you find are going to be actually in the Mantidae, unless, like I said, if you want to go out and get that Brunner's mantis, they're very, very easy to collect. But keep an eye out on the trees. I have seen some of these Liturgusids roaming around on the trees this spring. So they are around there. I'm in Maryland, so you might be able to find some around. And I'll talk to you guys later. Like and subscribe to the video. It helps me out a lot, or to the channel, and I'll see you around.